Kia ora. Welcome so much to Voice of Aroha. I'm Rata and I'm very, very excited to be interviewing with Luis today, and we have a very exciting guest. This is Hafsar. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We're so lucky to have you. Thank you so much. Would you like to say a few words, Luis and Hafsar?
Well, I know Hafsar personally, on a personal capacity, on a professional capacity. So I'm really happy to be here today and just to hear you korero, because I could listen to you for hours and hours. So welcome to Voice of Aroha.
Thank you very much. I always enjoy this kind of conversation with my colleagues. So I'm very happy to be here. And I just so we can have our conversation very organically and free.
Before we begin, I'd like to give a little introduction of Hafsar to our audience. She's an incredible woman. There's lots. I mean, what hasn't she done is a better description in the sector, I think. But just some of the things that she has done. She is a former Rohingya refugee from Myanmar and the Co-Secretary General at Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. Prior to this, she served as the chair of the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network until February in 2023. She's a steering committee member of Asia Pacific Network of Refugees, a member of Global Refugee Led Network, New Zealand country coordinator of Free Rohingya Coalition, a board director at Forces of Renewal Southeast Asia, and an interim working group member of Global Movements of Statelessness. She served as an interim advisory member of UNHCR Advisory Group, has been involved in different advocacy and activism spaces on statelessness, refugee rights, asylum seekers' rights, detention of migrants and refugees, and prevention and response to sexual and gender-based violence at regional, national, and international levels for over a decade. So she's been working in the sector for an incredibly long time and has been involved with incredible passion and enthusiasm for a long, long time, really in every space possible. She's worked with refugee communities on the prevention and response to sexual, gender-based violence and child marriage in Malaysia for 8 years as well, has extensive knowledge of the range of issues faced by refugee women in this space, and as well as their experiences prior to leaving the country of origin, and is a passionate advocate for improved prevention and responses measures to sexual and gender-based violence. But as well as that, she also was involved with conferences last week, is a very, very busy woman, and is incredibly, incredibly passionate in the field. We are so, so, so lucky to have you. So thank you so much for joining us today. That's a little bit about her. Some of the things you've done is a whole lot
I just hope people do not get bored listening to that long, boring introduction.
Yeah, and I think I do need to add to the wider list of things that she's done in the past, and she's an incredible person, an incredible friend as well, and someone that is so passionate about the community. And I just want to start with this, and it's going to start as kicking out, warming up. And what does the word refugee means to you?
Well, the word refugee means to me, it's just a label that the people in the system put. We're just humans like other human beings. But UNHCR described in their definition of somebody who has to flee and compelled to flee from their country based on persecution for their belief, political opinion, blah, blah. But from my opinion, it's just us human like you and me. But then the negative impacts of being a refugee is that a lot of things that belongs to you, your identity, your family, everything about you has been taken away from you. And then when you finally seek for protection, people then oftentimes view you as the burden. And it's become, for the refugee community, ongoing process of reclaiming our space, reclaiming our protection, reclaiming things that has been taken away from us. So I cannot find one specific way of defining what refugee means to me. It's just that the first thing that comes to my mind is that as a human being like you and me, but with a lot of negative impacts because of the system that make us refugee. We were not born as refugee. Yeah.
Exactly. And we often have these conversations at work, or, when do we need to use the label, the refugee? And especially when you have the youth that don't have the connection with what happened back in their countries, and they're like, I'm not. I'm just a normal teenager. And they're right, they're normal people. But as you said, it's always a negative connotation behind the word of refugees. When you hear the word, it's like, whoa, don't associate me with that sort of communities. And I like the aspect that you bring to the table, because you say we are humans like everyone else, and we share the same planet.
Yeah.
When you look at, a planet Earth from the universe, there's no borders, there's no boundaries, there's no like, you are there, I'm here. So that is a really cool definition of how you see, the communities. And just moving into what got you into this sort of work, what's your passion behind, being in the resettlement sector?
It's not, resettlement is a different thing. I am involved in a more broader sense of refugee. When we talk about refugee, we're talking about 108.4 million people forcibly displaced worldwide. So I'm passionate about refugees who are still escaping from their country, who are stuck in their own country, in the refugee camps, and the refugees who are fortunate enough to get resettled to finally, which is less than 1% of all these millions of people. So if I answer your question precisely about resettlement, it's because I think a lot of the time people feel like, okay, now we give you this $1 million ticket, now you got resettled, that's it, you are in paradise. So this is not right. Because refugees has been always on the survival mode. Right the time that they were forced to become a refugee, or the time that they were in transitioning from refugee camps to host country where they are not recognized, and then all this along the way, they never had a time to really land and then cope with this traumatized experience in their life. And then when they come to a new country, if we don't have a resettlement strategy and system and framework that will actually allow these people to heal, to cope with this trauma, and then to really thrive in a society, it will then become a failure again. And then it is very dangerous because the definition of resettlement and a lot of perspective on resettlement is that because someone is resettled, this person is a lot in a safer, better position, who do not require a lot of attention from us, then that can become very dangerous thing. It is not true, because even for resettlement, sometimes people may also have to experience about permanent separation from their loved ones. You don't get to pick which country you get to go. You don't get to pick who you can bring from your family. There are times that you have to leave some of your family member behind for your resettlement category. So there is a lot of that. So I think I become very passionate to look into what does the successful resettlement means. The successful resettlement means we are not only helping the refugee to survive just for the sake of surviving, really enabling them to thrive so that they become a part of our society, our community. They do not become just the recipient of our support and help. They then become the agents of change. They then have the ability to contribute back to our society. So that might be one of the main reasons why I am passionate for resettlement. But like I said, I'm also passionate for other durable solutions, like how do we improve the life of refugees in refugee camps so that they still have a life, they still have access to education, protection, and also looking at the long-term solution. If their situation of the countries are better, how do we make it possible for them to be able to go back in a safe, dignified way? So that's a lot of that, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack in there as well. And when you're talking about the solutions, and you also mentioning the golden, ticket to paradise, what are one of those solutions that you think we should be working on? Because, as you mentioned, like only less than 1% get the golden ticket. So what are those solutions that we should be working? Because 1 million displaced people living in, poor conditions, not having, support for their education, health system, and so on. It's a lot.
Is it after resettlement or for
the
general refugee?
General refugee.
General refugee now, I think in the global scale, we are looking into durable solution. So durable solution is the solution wherever they are right now. So countries like Malaysia, Thailand, many countries, they did not sign UN Convention 1951, which means the refugees who reside in those countries, legally or illegally, do not have access to education, access to social welfare, nothing. So they are living with nothing. So one solution that in the global space people are looking into is that how do we make sure that wherever they're stuck now, refugees are stuck, like a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. So for the younger generation to have access to the very basic education, because the right to education for the child is universal human right, and everyone knows that. And there are many countries who signed this CRC, Convention on the Rights of Children. So that includes they must allow children, regardless of their status, to get access to education, livelihood for the youth, and also access to very basic medical treatment and legal protection. So that is one durable solution. And also, now a lot of people talk about resilience building. So as I've mentioned before, refugees are like you and me. We have ability to contribute. We have ability to adapt, to learn and integrate. So resilience building is building resilience of the refugees wherever they are right now, be it in the refugee camps, be it in the countries where they are stuck, creating the platform for them so they can contribute to the host community wherever they are living instead of being the burden. So there is resilience building. So, of course, one tiny bit of solution, less than 1% of people getting resettled to many countries like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, US, those countries. But now we are also looking into, on top of that 1% of resettlement, can we then look into other pathway to getting these people based on their skill, based on other criteria? One thing that New Zealand has started is a community sponsorship program, which is a very small number. Yep. So we're also exploring to those. And the least favorable one, also one of the main solution is repatriation, going back to the country where people escape from fear of persecution, which involve a lot of political will from the host country itself. If the government of those countries do not want to change, do not want to give protection to these people, it will never happen. But it is ultimately the main goal, because it is no way possible that people will be able to resettle these 108.4 million people. So those are the solutions now we are unpacking in the global space. And also I was thinking the other day when I was at this forum, National Refugee Resettlement Forum, is that New Zealand may as well have the capacity to look beyond New Zealand. Yes, it's great that you are resettling people. There might as well be other opportunities for New Zealand to get involved to other solutions that I'm talking about. Can we then expand our humanitarian support to resilient building of refugees in those refugee camps and host country who will probably never have a chance to get resettled? Can we then support in the process of repatriation in terms of diplomatic support, advocacy support? So I think we can do a lot more in that sense, as well as in the resettlement space.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow, you can see you have an absolute wealth of knowledge, and it's so fantastic to have you talking about so many really, really diverse different issues within the refugee spaces. So thank you so much for that. Just going back to, I really, really appreciated you acknowledging, I think it's a really interesting issue, how to, I guess you touched on a little bit with the sort of repatriation of refugees and stuff like that, how New Zealand, but also every country and sort of national and globally, sort of can see refugees as people and as people who need time to heal and stuff like that, and being able to provide the safety and support that they do need, because they, of course, they've gone through tremendous things. If a New Zealander was sent to a war overseas and experienced some horrible things, we'd come back and give them therapy for 2 years or whatever, versus they come to New Zealand and say, oh, you're good now, go to school, get a job, and it's so giving them the space and the support that they do need for everything they've gone through, but also as an issue, seeing that refugees have incredible skills and gifts, and not seeing, I think often within the space there's a lot of political meandering around, we're being charitable by taking in refugees, and it can very easily turn into it's an obligation, or kind of refugees are a negative part of New Zealand society, the kind of stigma around refugee issues and around immigration in general as well, versus actually seeing that refugees have such strengths, and actually how to integrate both those two perspectives of they're incredible people who've got so much to offer with their culture, with their religion, with their beliefs and perspectives, as well as the resilience of what they've gone through, but then also giving them what they need. Do you have any ideas around that for resettlement strategies in New Zealand or globally for kind of integrating those two perspectives?
Yeah, also my mind is still in that, because last week we had this forum, so we talk a lot about, even before that I was also having conversation with my other colleague, is that there is, during COVID 2020, there was xenophobia against refugee in country like Malaysia and Bangladesh, because Bangladesh was still hosting about 1 million plus refugee on their land. And then Malaysia also have 180,000 refugee plus, now almost 200,000. So when COVID arose, this hatred and this distress all target to the more vulnerable group, and then they have hatred against refugee for no reason. And the general population get easily brainwashed and easily get to that frame, because now that I said, but at that time I was really passionate, I was really doing this advocacy about changing narrative from this xenophobia. They are not the reason that you don't have enough support from your government in terms of COVID vaccination, food, or anything. They're not taking anything away from you. But now I sit back, I reflect. I think it was also important because when people don't know each other, there is fear, the element of fear. I think one of the things that we have not done well in those host communities where they have millions of refugees, and also as well as maybe in New Zealand we can still work better, is that getting to know each other, creating the platform where refugee communities and the host community getting to know each other, and changing the perspective of refugee by the host community is that they are also human like us. The reason that they are here is because everything that belongs to them has been unfairly, unjustly taken away from them, and we are doing our bit as our international humanitarian obligations. And then also looking at, okay, now we know you. When we know each other, and then we exchange about stories, your stories, and then we share culture and values, we then become that we then build that relationship as human sense, and we don't have that element of fear anymore. So there was the element that was missing during COVID and xenophobia. When people don't know about each other, it's very easy to just brainwash and shift the interest of the people to, other topic and do that political, how do I call it, political game. If you don't want people to be interested in this, and you just switch the narrative. So I think it is something that we should work on. And also during the forum, there was one successful resettlement example shared by a group of resettlement communities involved in Lebanon. So the kind of models that they shared is that they got Tangata Whenua involved in the resettlement process in their work. They actually created Hui, where the refugees will come and talk to Tangata Whenua, the people from that neighborhood. And then the people then really can connect and relate. And they, community who are not working for resettlement sector, even got involved helping these refugee farmers. So that's the beautiful element of that. So I think resettlement strategy should reflect about looking in all the people involved in helping these refugees thrive in this community, in this country. That involve all the NGOs involved, CBOs, community organization involved, community leaders themselves, and also the people of the land themselves, because we are on their land. We need to acknowledge them. We need to get to know them. They also get to know us. And then that's how we build this relationship, and then we then create that human connection. I think that's very important element that we need to work on.
Thank you so much, and thank you especially also for those stories as well. It sounds like a really, really beautiful understanding, and I completely agree. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you've been mentioning a lot about the National Refugee Resettlement Forum, and the theme being...
Am I going to be in trouble?
No, partnership and meaningful participation. What does it mean? Partnership and meaningful participation. And the resettlement, area that we live in Aotearoa. And I also want your opinion of how can we, duplicate this model that you mentioned and live in? Because it's a very small scale. How can we scale that out and, across the country and also in other, regions? Because we get in New Zealand a very small, tiny portion of, the whole refugee issue. And how can we scale these models that actually work?
I think it's all began from us, from the will of wanting to do good. And I call it the example from Lebanon, also in the global regional space. We always look into, we call it good practices, good example. So that's, to me, is a good practice that we can replicate, we can set as our models. So if it is really successful, if these models really help the refugee communities to feel safe and to integrate successfully in the community, then we should adopt that. This meaningful partnership and also participation is really essential, because even before this National Refugee Resettlement Forum, I was in other meeting in the global space and other regional space. So now we are talking about 108.4 million people. This is massive. And then not to mention we have ongoing Ukraine refugee crisis. We have ongoing Afghan refugee crisis. We have ongoing coup of Myanmar. We have ongoing refugee crisis in Uganda, in Africa, such and such. So, which means we are also expecting, not to mention also climate refugees coming up very soon. So, which means we are anticipating, whether you like it or not, more number of refugees, a great number of refugees. Then, if we want to address this refugee crisis, whether be it nationally, regionally, globally, we cannot do it alone. And no matter what your pride is, that's it. There is no way one entity or one organization or one individual can deal with this. So we now have to look at a whole of society approach. So the whole of society approach, the element of is that people coming together for their shared vision, people seeing each other as their partner, and then allowing people with lived experience meaningfully to participate. That requires for us to unlearn a lot of things, because in the past, in this space, whether be it in the global space or regional or national space, we have to compete for the space. We have to compete for the funding. So we need to get over with this. So we have to be really look into, we are not competing with each other. We are rather complementing each other in the work that we do, because by competing for the space, by competing for the funding, we are not going anywhere. We are not creating any good at all. So it is very crucial for us now to think about this, a whole of society approach. If it's very important language that is using in other space, why not we use it in New Zealand? And now to have that partnership, we can name it, we can say it, but then we also require to do critical thinking. The partnership that we're talking about, the participation that we are talking about, is it genuine enough? Is it meaningful enough? If it's not, how do we make sure it's genuine? So one thing that I mentioned during this forum is that I said in the morning, I said, I am going to be your critical friend. So being a critical friend means I am going to be really critical about my friend, not because I hate you, because I want you to improve. So that's what I did throughout this 2 forum. So I was critically analyzing and also providing feedback, which will be uncomfortable, because this uncomfortable conversation need to happen. Even if it's uncomfortable, it is very important for us to have this conversation. Not because, again, we hate each other, not because, again, we are competing for each other. We need to look beyond that, because we are now talking about the greater cause. We are now talking about the lives of people and humans. So it was very important and fascinating 2 days event. And I think it was, to me, it's the first step. And I don't know about other people. I felt it was a little bit of different forum than others, because I heard people are really being courageous enough, critical enough to tell of the organization, the department, the people that need to hear this conversation. Yes, you're doing this, but we need more than this. This is not working for our community. This is working for our community. This is what we need. So it was very important. And again, it has to be an ongoing thing. Partnership is not one of thing, and participation is not one of thing. As long as we have refugee resettlement happening in New Zealand, as long as we have this community living in this country, it has to be ongoing engagement, ongoing partnership, ongoing participation from us. Again, we cannot do it alone. And just because people hold power, it doesn't mean only the people who hold power can shift this narrative, can shape this positive impact. It has to be all of us, because we do inevitably have a lot of invaluable expertise and knowledge we need to incorporate. So one thing as well we have to reflect is that if it was working how we used to work in the past, we will not be dealing with this many messiness today. So it means we definitely need to reflect and critically think about how and why we are still talking about the same problem and issues that we talk about 15 and 20 years ago. So if we don't want to have this issue again moving forward, this is the time for now for us to critically reflect, think, and evaluate and redo things. Unlearn, learn.
I think we were not there at the National Forum. And when you talk about participation, we felt like it was the way that was communicated to us. It was too late. And it was like, oh, you guys just come, and just because we need just people to fill the space. So when you're talking about participation and meaningful, integration and participation, we feel like there's so much work to be done, and definitely we need to relearn and rethink. And I genuinely think that we need to have a reshuffle in the resettlement space, because we need people with lived experience to voice it out and to be in front rather than at the back. because they're the ones that know what works better. They are the ones that actually understand the system better than anyone else. And they shouldn't put someone else just to speak on their behalf. And that should change not just in Aotearoa, but across the global, space. And you talk about the refugee space or the resettlement space. That should change. And I feel like we should be going toward the meaningful participation when our communities are being in front rather than at the back. And I really love about the critical friend, because I've been hearing about this critical friend. I was like, what is this about? I really missed that one. But it was wonderful. And one of the feedbacks that I got from many community members was like, we want Hafsar to speak on our behalf, because many people felt identified with you. It was like, that's what I mean. That's what I've been having in my mind for many years. So people are seeing you now as our savior, and in a good way. But I think we're coming to an end, or do we have more time?
We don't have very much time. I want to say I completely agree with Luis, and I think especially you talking about the courage to hold people accountable and say, no, actually it's a loving thing to do, as to be that friend, to say, actually, New Zealand, we Aotearoa, we believe in you. You can do better. We want you to be the best place, most inclusive space for everyone. And actually, it is such a I completely commend you for everything. It's so incredible. So I think very last question is if you have any advice for our audience for anything you want to say. But no, we're so thankful for you.
I just want to share is that when we are in this kind of space, one thing also that stood out from the forum is that the power and the privilege that we hold, because no matter who you are, you do have the privilege and the power that you do not sometimes necessarily realize it, even for refugees. So when I have never identified or called myself a leader, but people might call you a leader, I don't know, for whatever reason, and then you then have the platform, you then have all the contact and all this, and then we now have to think about the privilege that I sit and the power that I sit, how do I utilize it? And also when people provide feedback and comment to us, if we are in the defensive position, we never hear people. We do not listen to the people. So very important for us, one, not to be in the defensive position, two, realizing our power and privileges, and then how do we position ourselves in this space? Now I have this power and this privilege, how do I position myself? And also the people who are in power, whatever department they are, government or policymakers, also need to think about the power that they hold, and then making it really comfortable for the people to be able to talk to them and to provide feedback to them. And it's required to decentralize the power a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you so much. You're absolutely incredible, and I wish we could talk to you for much longer, but I'm sure if you're keen on hearing Hafsar, you will see her within the community, so we will...
Yeah, I think I told you from the very beginning, we can listen to Hafsar for forever. Yeah. But I just want to thank you for your knowledge, expertise, and everything that comes out of you is people are just realizing, wow, this is what we need to hear, because often we don't hear this, and this needs to be said.
I think because you live it as well. I think you have this wisdom because you live what you say, and we see it. So hopefully you'll continue changing the world, and we're so lucky to have you talking to us today. So thank you so much. We have an incredible evening. We've been very, very, very lucky. Thank you so much, Hafsar. Thank you, Luis. Thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you've really, really enjoyed this section. I certainly have. So everyone have a lovely evening. Thank you so much, and check out our social media, Voice of Aroha, and Wellington Access Radio later. Bye-bye.